The peeling paint of Lakewood High's auditorium walls did little to dampen the sound of the marching band rehearsal. To Jaya Deshmukh, standing just outside the double doors, the cacophony wasn't noise. It was the rhythm of belonging, the pulse of a life she desperately wanted. Jaya, 17, carried the quiet weight of an existence pieced together from scraps. Orphaned after a sudden illness claimed her parents 3 years ago, she lived with an older cousin who provided shelter but little warmth or financial support. Every cent was stretched, every extra a luxury denied. And music, specifically the resonant deep hum of the cello, was the ultimate luxury. The annual band tryouts were announced on a faded poster tacked to the bulletin board. Seeking dedicated musicians for the Lakewood Thunderbolts. Jaya traced the image of a gleaming brass tuba, her heart pounding a hopeful, frantic beat against her ribs. She didn't own an instrument. She hadn't had a single lesson. All she possessed was an almost painful love for music and a knack for fixing things. The next day, she nervously approached Mr. Harrison, the band director, a man whose stern expression was softened only by the passion in his eyes. "A cello, you say, Deshmukh?" Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. "Our loaner instruments are all assigned. They go fast, especially the strings." He gestured toward a rack holding 2 battered clarinets and a rusty triangle. "Unless you have access to one?" Jaya swallowed the lump in her throat. "No, sir. I don't." He sighed, genuinely regretful. "Then I'm afraid, Jaya, without an instrument, you can't even audition. A cello starts at about $3,000, minimum. It's not something we can improvise." The word improvise stuck in her mind like a burr. Later that afternoon, in the school library, Jaya scrolled through images of cellos. Their graceful curves, the rich, polished wood, they looked impossible, like artifacts from another planet. But then she stumbled across a diagram of a diddley bow and then, an article about homemade box guitars. A wild, impossible idea took root. If she couldn't buy one, she would build one. Jaya's cousin lived in a small, detached garage unit behind a row of businesses. It was there, amidst the discarded crates and forgotten tools, that her project began. Her early scouting missions were focused on salvage. She spent weekends haunting the perimeter of a closed lumberyard and a struggling hardware store. Her first major find was the body, 2 thick, clean squares of salvaged birch plywood, meant to be discarded shelving, that were strong enough to serve as the front and back plates. For the ribs, she found strips of flexible, thin composite wood from a broken wine crate. The neck was the hardest part. It needed to be sturdy, straight, and able to withstand the immense tension of the strings. After much searching, she found a discarded maple banister post behind a renovation site, heavy, dense, and perfectly straight. Brian, a quiet, lanky boy notorious for spending his free periods in the school's woodshop, often saw Jaya dragging oddly shaped items into her yard. He was known for his precision, his ability to make wood sing without sound. One chilly Tuesday, he found her meticulously sanding the birch plates, her face smeared with sawdust. She was attempting to carve the delicate scroll for the instrument's head with a dull kitchen knife. "That's serious dedication," Brian remarked, leaning on the rickety fence. "What are you making?" "A medieval torture device." Jaya looked up, startled. "A cello." Brian raised an eyebrow, looking from the small stack of wood to the monumental task ahead. "A cello needs specific interior bracing, Jaya. If you don't brace the sound post correctly, the bridge will collapse under the string tension, and the whole box will implode." Jaya felt a familiar tightening in her chest. He wasn't mocking her. He was stating facts. "I don't know how to do the bracing." "I do," Brian said simply. He stepped over the fence. "But you're going to need better tools than that butter knife." Their partnership was accidental and immediate. Jaya had the vision and the drive. Brian had the technical skill and the access to the school shop's industrial clamps and measuring tools, used surreptitiously after hours. They worked for weeks. Brian insisted on precise measurements, showing Jaya how to calculate the exact distance of the neck to ensure proper intonation. He showed her how to curve the ribs using steam from an old kettle and mold the pieces into the classic teardrop shape. Jaya, in turn, specialized in the aesthetic and the scavenged details. The fingerboard was a strip of dense, black plastic sheeting cut from an old industrial conveyor belt. The F-holes, the openings that allow sound to escape, were cut not into graceful curves, but into jagged electric streaks, a symbol of the instrument's chaotic birth. For the strings, she used high-tension wire salvaged from discarded guitar pedals found at a repair shop, carefully calibrated for cello tuning. The finished instrument was a marvel of resourcefulness, if not classical beauty. It was slightly smaller than a traditional 4/4 cello, its body a patchwork of light birch and dark composite wood, held together by industrial adhesive and sheer willpower. She stained it a deep, smoky charcoal using old walnut husks. She named it the Echo Box. Practice was a grueling, solitary affair. Jaya had to teach herself the basics of finger placement and bowing from shaky YouTube videos watched on a cracked phone screen. The Echo Box did not sound like a Stradivarius. When she initially drew the bow across the tight strings, the sound was raw, metallic, and loud, a little rebellious. But as the wood settled and Jaya found her touch, the resonance surprised her. The plywood box, braced with Brian's careful precision, vibrated fiercely, giving the instrument a unique, gritty depth. It didn't sing like polished mahogany, it roared like recycled steel. Her progress was constantly shadowed by the weight of expectation and the sting of external judgment. Evelyn, the reigning queen of the Lakewood orchestral section, played a violin that was rumored to be antique, passed down through generations of musicians. Evelyn was impeccable. Impeccable grades, impeccable posture, impeccable music. Jaya ran into Evelyn in the hallway near the music lockers just days before tryouts. Jaya was struggling to carry the cumbersome Echo Box, which was wrapped loosely in an old blanket. Evelyn stopped, her perfect French braid swinging slightly. She narrowed her eyes at the shape under the blanket. "What is that, Jaya?" Evelyn asked, her voice dripping with careful condescension. "Did you find a piece of modern art in the trash?" Jaya clutched the blanket tighter. "It's my instrument. For the tryouts." Evelyn snorted, a delicate, practiced sound. "A cello, supposedly? You know the school requires a certain quality of instrument. You can't just drag some junk into an audition and expect to be taken seriously. This is the Thunderbolts, not the Junkyard Band." The words were a calculated, precise blow aimed directly at Jaya's deepest insecurity, her poverty and her outsider status. "It works," Jaya managed, her voice trembling. "We'll see," Evelyn replied, examining her fingernails. "Some of us have invested years and considerable funds into our craft. That kind of talent can't be built overnight with a tube of glue and hope." Jaya watched Evelyn walk away, her anger heating her cheeks. Evelyn hadn't just insulted the instrument. She had negated the thousands of hours, the sleepless nights, and the desperate dedication that had gone into its construction. That night, Jaya didn't practice technique. She practiced emotion. She played a piece Brian had found for her, a challenging, soulful adaptation of an old folk melody that required deep, sustained notes and powerful bowing. She played until her fingers bled tiny dots onto the makeshift fingerboard, channeling every ounce of her frustration and determination into the music. The audition day was a blur of tight nerves and the smell of old varnish. Students lined the hallway, instruments gleaming. Flutes shimmered, trumpets shone, and Evelyn's Italian violin radiated expensive history. Jaya stood apart, her charcoal-stained Echo Box unwrapped, its raw edges and visible seemed starkly contrasting with the other instruments. When she entered the audition room, the silence was immediate and thick. Mr. Harrison sat at the center of the judging panel, flanked by two alumni musicians. Mr. Harrison's eyes first swept over Jaya, then settled, perplexed, on the cello. His jaw tightened. "Miss Deshmukh," he said, his voice hesitant. "Is that a cello?" "Yes, sir," Jaya said, trying to keep her posture straight. "It's a custom build. It's fully tuned and calibrated." An alumnus leaned forward, skeptical. "Did you build that yourself?" "With some technical assistance," Jaya admitted, thinking of Brian's careful work. Mr. Harrison rubbed his temples. "I appreciate your ingenuity, Jaya. But the band requires instruments that can blend, that meet orchestral standards. We judge on tone quality and projection, not just enthusiasm. "I understand, sir," Jaya said. "Please, just let me play the required excerpt. If the tone doesn't meet the standard, I'll accept the decision." She sat down, placing the echo box's end pin, a modified steel furniture leg, firmly on the polished floor. Jaya took a deep breath. She didn't look at the judges. She looked only at the dark wood of the neck, thinking of the hours spent bonding the pieces together. She began the required piece, the opening bars of the Bach Cello Suite No. 1. The first notes were a revelation. Instead of the warm, buttery tone of a traditional cello, the echo box produced a sound that was starker, more immediate. The plywood body, being lighter and stiffer than traditional maple, created a powerful, almost percussive attack. The sound wasn't refined, it was raw, resonant, and deeply expressive. Jaya played with an intensity born of desperation. She wasn't just hitting notes, she was telling the story of her isolation, her struggle, and her relentless hope. When she reached the high, soaring passages, she gave a powerful, sweeping bow stroke, and the echo box didn't crack or squeak. It rang out with a defiant, vibrant hum that cut through the silence. The judges stopped scribbling notes. Mr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his stern expression replaced by one of profound surprise. The music was technically solid, but the voice of the instrument was unlike anything they had ever heard. It had character, a sharp, metallic edge that gave the Bach a modern, emotional urgency. When the final note faded, a sustained low resonance that seemed to hang in the air, the silence returned. Jaya's hands were shaking. She waited. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Miss Deshmukh," he said slowly, "that was unexpected." The alumnus on the left nodded slowly. "The instrument's voice is highly unorthodox, but the dynamic range is phenomenal. And your control, considering you taught yourself on that." He trailed off, shaking his head slightly. "It lacks the classic warmth," Mr. Harrison continued, "but it possesses an undeniable presence. A raw authenticity." He looked directly at Jaya. Every note felt earned. The results were posted 3 hours later. Jaya, exhausted and emotionally drained, couldn't bring herself to look immediately. Brian was the one who found her, working diligently on a broken bicycle chain in the deserted shop corridor. "Jaya," he said, breathless, "the list is up." Jaya wiped grease from her hands. "Tell me." Brian grinned, a genuine, wide smile that rarely surfaced. "You made it. You're listed as cello, substitute/experimental string section." Relief flooded Jaya, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. She had done it. The very first full band rehearsal was intimidating. Jaya walked in with the echo box, passing the neatly organized rows of standard instruments. The other students stared. Evelyn was already tuning her violin. As Jaya settled into the last chair in the string section, Evelyn approached her. Jaya braced herself for another insult, maybe a final critique of the echo box's unconventional materials. Evelyn paused, looking down at the instrument's patched body. She didn't sneer. She looked thoughtful. "The tone," Evelyn said, her voice low. "I heard a girl talking about your audition. She said it sounded more like a bass guitar than a cello, and she meant it as an insult." Jaya kept her silence. "But I listened to the excerpt recording Mr. Harrison played later," Evelyn continued, meeting Jaya's eyes. "It doesn't blend perfectly with the violas, but when it's supposed to carry the melody, Jaya, it cuts through. It's got a grit the rest of us just don't have." Evelyn paused, and for the first time, Jaya saw a flicker of something genuine, maybe even respect, behind the polished facade. "I spent $6,000 on my bow alone," Evelyn admitted quietly. "You spent nothing but effort, and you built an instrument that has a personality. It sounds like you." It was the highest compliment Jaya could have received. "Thank you, Evelyn," Jaya replied, surprised by the sudden warmth in her chest. Over the next few months, Jaya and the echo box cemented their place in the Lakewood Thunderbolts. Mr. Harrison found unique ways to use the instrument, capitalizing on its intense projection in dynamic pieces. He called its sound the Lakewood Resonance, a signature depth they hadn't possessed before. Jaya didn't just join the band, she became the symbol of its spirit. She was the proof that resources were not a prerequisite for passion, and that true creativity lay not in acquisition, but in invention. The echo box, with its visible seams, its dark, unconventional stain, and its raw, powerful voice, stood proudly among the gleaming, costly instruments. It was proof that something beautiful, something vital, could be built from discarded pieces, resilience, and an unwavering symphony of hope. It was Jaya's music, built with her own 2 hands, and it finally brought her home. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.